In 1959, in Burma, Myanmar, there was a place called Indochina. At that time, the French who controlled the area were beaten back and suffered a very humiliating defeat. Because of that, France left the region. But apparently, after that, the area became a gathering place for war criminals, such as European criminals, former Nazis, and other cruel criminals. The place is also a shelter for soldiers who have ended their term of service. At that time, it was seen that a prisoner was being taken somewhere. Arriving at his destination, it turns out that he will be fighting with other prisoners. His name is Martin Tillman, and his opponent is named Israel. They fought in front of the local officials. Martin didn't seem to find it hard against Israel until in the end, Martin managed to win the match. After that, the ruler there, Steiner, immediately ordered his executioner, Rastig, to finish the match by killing Israel. After the match was over, Martin was taken back to his holding cell. A guard carrying Martin seduces a woman who is passing by. Martin, who didn't like it, immediately beat the guard. The woman's name was Isabel, and it turned out that she came there every week to give flowers to the leader there, Steiner. Martin, who knew about this, asked Isabel, who happened to walk to the front of his cell. Martin asked why Isabel did this, even though Steiner never paid any attention to her arrival. Isabel instead answered whether Martin also wanted to be visited every week. Isabel believes that Martin is a good person who doesn't deserve to go to prison, considering that he also helped her from the harassment of the guards earlier. Martin, who was ignorant, refused this. Behind that, a former corporal named Boone reported to Steiner that someone wanted to meet him. And it turns out that the person who wanted to meet Steiner was an agent from England, Yukup. Yukup said he had information that Martin Tillman was in prison in this area, and he asked Steiner to give Martin to him to be brought to England and tried there. Martin turns out to be one of the fugitives who escaped from England, but Steiner, who has made Martin his best fighter, says that he doesn't know Martin's whereabouts and has never known Martin Tillman. Then, Yukup was expelled from the place. That afternoon, Martin was summoned to Steiner's room. There, Steiner introduces the people he's been collaborating with and reminds Martin that Martin isn't the only outlaw in the scene. On Martin's left side, there is the executioner, Rastig, who is a special troop from Spain who fought for Nazi. Then, there is Corporal Boone, a special forces officer from Vietnam who was once considered a hero by his people, but now his country considers him as a traitor, and Corporal Boone became Vietnam's most wanted man. Then, there is Amarillo, once a staunch fighter from Berlin, but now exiled here. There, Steiner is about to free Martin at a moment's notice. But before Martin left, Steiner invited Martin to join his group and form a strong force, considering that Martin was also being targeted by Yukup from England. But here, Martin refused this and he chose to find his own way of life. Steiner deliberately released Martin because he thought that Martin would not go far from that place. After that, Martin, who was still confused about where to go, went to Isabel's house. Of course Isabel was very happy, then she introduced Martin to her stepfather, Valentine. Valentine is a bar owner in the area. There, Martin and Valentine talked a lot. Then, Martin asked what was the reason Isabel always came to give flowers to Steiner. Here, we know that in fact, Isabel's mother was a local resident who was married to Steiner. Until one day, Steiner accused his wife of betraying him, and what was worse, Steiner did not recognize Isabel as his biological daughter at all. And the reason Isabel came there every week was because she hoped Steiner would admit that Isabel was his daughter. After that, finally Valentine got Martin to work with him. Valentine also provides a place to stay for Martin. Day after day, Martin passed in that place. Now, he too had found a peace he had never experienced before. Moreover, now that Martin and Isabel are in love. One night, Valentine's bar looks very crowded. But there was a dispute between one visitor and another, until Valentine asked Martin to expel them. Seeing Martin pretending to be a champ, one of them wanted to beat up Martin. But that person was defeated by Martin. Even Martin also beat up all of his men who tried to fight back. The next day, Martin and the others are visited by Corporal Boone and Rastig. There, they said that the person Martin beat last night was a fighter belonging to Steiner, and because of Martin's actions last night, the fighter could not fight because he was seriously injured. Here, they convey a message from Steiner that Martin must take responsibility by replacing his fighter. Martin will also be paid quite handsomely if he wins the match. But Martin refused this, because he was more comfortable being a barman than being a fighter. Hearing this, Rastig threatened Martin. If Martin did not comply with Steiner's wishes, he would move his operations to this bar and would expel Martin and the others. After that, Martin and Valentine talked. Martin said that he was jinxed by everyone around him, but Valentine replied that everyone had their own problems to deal with. And Valentine also allowed Martin to indulge Steiner's wishes. The next day, early in the morning, Martin said goodbye to Isabel to go to Steiner's headquarters. Isabel couldn't do anything and she could only pray for Martin's safety. Shortly, Martin had arrived at Steiner's headquarters, and at that moment Martin was immediately escorted to the battlefield. Seeing the people there, began to place bets. Martin managed to beat the person who was his opponent. Even after Martin managed to beat the fighter, Martin was immediately pitted against his other opponents. It turns out that Martin managed to beat them without even once accepting defeat. It looks like Steiner's group got a lot of money because his fighter, Martin, was able to finish them off. Behind that, Valentine is visited by Yukup. He came there to inquire about Martin's whereabouts, because previously he received information that Martin was living with Valentine. Valentine admits that Martin did live with him, but now Martin has gone somewhere. Yukup explains that Martin used to wreak havoc in England under the pretext of avenging his brother and father who died in the battle. He also said that whoever shows Martin's whereabouts, he will get a prize of 10,000 euros. But Valentine and Isabel chose to remain silent and told Yukup to leave quickly. After finishing the fight, Steiner invited Martin to sit back and drink coffee. Steiner explains that he is also a fugitive, just like Martin. And it turns out, Steiner is a member of the Nazis, from Germany. There, Steiner invited Martin to join him and continue making money with the group. If Martin agrees, then next week Martin will just have to come here again, and also promise that he will give Martin a big bonus. After that, Steiner gave Martin his fee, because Martin had managed to win all of his matches. The scene switches to when Steiner is in his room alone. He wrote with a typewriter about his story, which contained that Steiner actually admitted that Isabel was his daughter. Moreover, she was born from the woman that Steiner loved the most. But in the last stanza, Steiner writes that now this has changed, when the wife has betrayed him by defending her own people. And that reason makes Steiner never want to admit Isabel as his daughter. Then, the inscription was kept above the wedding photo of Steiner and Isabel's mother. On the other hand, Martin returns to Valentine's place. After Martin came home, Valentine advised Martin to immediately go to America with Isabel and start their new life there. Moreover, Martin is also being sought by Yukup from England, while Valentine himself plans to sell his bar and live in Thailand. Martin agrees with the plan, but he will fight one more time for more money. Long story short, Martin met Steiner again to do battle. But there, Steiner says that no other fighter wants to fight Martin, whereas people just want to place their bets on Martin. Then, Steiner suggested something to Martin. If Martin wants to get a big bonus, he has to lose in the next game, and let people place their bets on Martin. Here, Martin, who needed money for his escape plan, immediately agreed to this. Long story short, Martin competed. Everyone places their bets on Martin's victory. Martin could have won easily, but considering he had to lose, Martin pretended that he was unable to fight his enemy, and Martin was considered to have lost the match. Behind that, it turns out that Valentine is secretly taking part in the bet by guaranteeing his bar for Martin's victory. Valentine was very shocked when he heard that Martin had lost the match. It turns out that it was all Rastig's plan, the executioner. There, they told Valentine to quickly pack up his things and leave the bar. Isabel, who couldn't believe Martin's defeat, tried to ask them what was the reason Martin could lose. Amarillo replied that everything can be arranged. Knowing that they had framed Valentine, Isabel slapped Amarillo in the face. Amarillo, whose cheeks felt hot, slapped Isabel back. Seeing this, Valentine did not accept that his adopted daughter was tortured. He takes out a gun, but Rastig manages to grab the weapon, then he shoots Valentine and Isabel dead. Shortly thereafter, Martin, who doesn't know anything, comes there. But Rastig immediately shoots Martin until he is sprawled. After that, those who knew that Martin and Isabel were dying immediately buried them alive. After they left, Martin managed to get up, then he tried to get Isabel out. The next day, Isabel was seen who had survived her death. Then Martin entrusted Isabel to the locals, and after that Martin started training with an old man who would mentor him, because now he is determined to take revenge against Steiner and his men. Long story short, Martin goes to the bar, which is now controlled by Steiner and the gang. Then, he slaughtered the people there without mercy, and it turns out that there is also Amarillo. Luckily, Amarillo managed to escape from the place and he went straight to Steiner's headquarters to complain about everything. It was clear that Amarillo was terrified. Then, Steiner told Amarillo to move their money which they had saved somewhere, because Steiner thought that Martin was after their money. Amarillo rushed there with the soldiers. When Amarillo was about to move all the money, Martin came and immediately slaughtered all the soldiers. After that, Martin shoots Amarillo in the hand then kills him. Martin apparently did not take a penny of the money and chose to leave there. On the other hand, at Steiner's headquarters, they prepared troops to welcome Martin's arrival, while Martin was shaving his beard to look cool. After that, Martin infiltrated Steiner's headquarters from behind, then Martin killed Steiner's men one by one. Martin tries to get into Steiner's room by killing the guards inside. Martin finally gets to meet Steiner. Without thinking, Martin immediately killed him. Shortly thereafter, Corporal Boone came and saw Steiner who had been killed by Martin. Corporal Boone, who is a manly man, then put his gun on the couch and challenged Martin to a duel. They paralyze each other and it looks like Corporal Boone is very strong. Martin continued to be beaten hard and it seemed he was unable to match Corporal Boone's prowess. Until Martin cornered to the sofa, then Martin took Corporal Boone's gun and shot him to death. Turns out Corporal Boone is a manly man but he's not very smart. After Amarillo, Steiner, and Corporal Boone died, now Martin has only one mission left, to kill Rastig. There, Martin finds a burnt piece of paper, which contains Steiner's confession about Isabel written in the first verse as well as a photo of Steiner with Isabel's mother. After that, he approached Rastig and saw Rastig and his troops ready to hunt down Martin. With his prowess, Martin kills Rastig's men mercilessly. Martin, who began to be pushed, started to go into the house. Rastig ordered all of his remaining troops to go in and hunt down Martin. Luckily, Martin managed to incapacitate them all until he exchanged guns with Rastig and he fired a missed shot. Rastig, who feels unable to fight Martin, tries to escape in his jeep, while Martin brought Isabel's mother's wedding photo and the piece of paper earlier to send to Isabel. A few weeks later, Martin continues to chase Rastig wherever he goes, while Rastig is currently bankrupt and has lost his authority. Plus, he was hated by local residents. On the other hand, Isabel, who received a message from Martin, was very happy because it turned out that all this time Steiner had admitted that she was his biological daughter. Until one day, Martin manages to find Rastig's car and sees him there. Then Rastig said that he was too tired to keep running from Martin and now he wanted to finish it. Rastig immediately challenged Martin to a duel with his bare hands. When he was about to duel, it turned out that Rastig was carrying a knife and he immediately attacked Martin blindly, so that Martin was injured. Martin took the wrench and they continued their duel. Rastig's weapon was brought down, then they started to stun each other with their bare hands. Several times Rastig launched attacks at Martin, until Martin changed the situation and managed to paralyze Rastig. Martin stabs Rastig in honor of Valentine's death. After all his revenge had been avenged, Martin climbed into the jeep and smoked. Shortly thereafter, Yukup was able to find Martin. Yukup said he would take Martin to England to stand trial there. But before bringing Martin there, Martin said that he will kill Yukup first. Then, Yukup said that he will stop Martin's arrest, as long as Martin wants to join him. Without thinking, Martin agreed.